I got to count the another $1 billion I lost. I've lost $2 billion in the last 2 days.
Are you guys recording? Please record this.
Looks like we need a poker game tomorrow.
Can you imagine how tilted Chamath is going to go into the poker game?
He's going to be
$2 million in the markets. He's going to buy in for $2 million just to try and get even.
Let your winners ride.
Rain Man David Sass.
We open sourced it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it.
Love you, besties. Queen of Quinoa. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the All In Podcast. We took a week off, and boy, that was sad. I missed you guys. I missed my besties.
Well, we should tell people we had a small medical procedure for one of the besties, and but everything's good, and it was planned, so nothing out of the ordinary. But we just needed to take a week off, so that's why we missed a week, and that's why we're back.
Yes, and one of the besties. God, I got so many jokes I'm not going to tell. All the jokes that came into my mind right now would get me canceled.
You canceled? Really?
I literally had 7 jokes. I can't tell any of them.
Based on the amount of money that I've lost in the last 2 days, I'm ready to get canceled. So it's fine. So I just put them in the chat, and I'm just going to fucking let them rip.
All right, everybody. David Sachs, the Rain Man, is here calling in from an undisclosed compound.
Miami.
Friedberg, the Queen of Quinoa, back in action. And the dictator himself, licking his wounds,
$2 billion per billion a day. Keep it going.
Checking the Apple stock app, hitting refresh, and going, thank God these companies have fundamentals, because I haven't seen this much blood since Game of Thrones.
Jason, honestly, at this run rate, I can lose $1 trillion.
Yeah. Chamath, how do you feel today?
Worth less than me. How
does today feel compared to last March when the same thing was happening? Every day the market was down 10%.
Well, this is what's important to remember.
We made a joke. It was like it could only go down 10% so many days in a row.
March 31st. You guys have to remember that March 31st of 2020, the headlines all over the press, and you can go to the Wayback Machine and look at these things. But the Dow was down 20 some odd percent. The S&P was down 20%. And it looked like the world was going to end. And then we had our first big stimulus bill. And things started to China started to reopen slowly, and things started to look better. And what's interesting is you have this rotational sort of deleveraging that's happening right now. People are repricing in inflation. People are moving into sort of these overlooked stories, getting out of growth a little bit, and it's a bloodbath. But I would just encourage us all to remember that we were in some pretty dark days in March of last year as well. And, when you looked at it by the end of the year, it looked amazing. So
I would just add to that. The markets are looking pretty grim for tech stocks right now, but this all started because of a really great jobs report showing that the economy is roaring back. So we added 379,000 jobs in February, which beat expectations by 200,000. They also revised the January gains up 166,000. So now the unemployment rate is down to 6.2%. Remember, it was at like 15%, last summer during the lockdowns for COVID. So, I mean, all of this is fundamentally due to, I think, really great news in the economy because COVID is ending. And which kind of begs the question of why we need another $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. But I think that ultimately there's a lot of good news in the real economy. And what investors are doing is figuring out how to now price or reprice all these different stocks in light of the economy roaring back.
So just a little math lesson to build on what you're saying. Everybody has a risk-free rate, and all stocks are priced according to that risk-free rate. And when, for the last sort of year, particularly when risk-free rates were essentially 0 to negative, meaning, that's the riskless money that you get from the government. It was hard to do anything except be long growth stocks in a big, big way. But David, to your point, if we get 2 or 3 more quarters of these kinds of jobs numbers, you're going to have a, low single digit unemployment number. And what that means is wages will have to go up for businesses to compete. And that's the kind of traditional form of inflation that actually reprices things, because you lever up rates to kind of control inflation. When you lever up rates and you all of a sudden they're not 0, but they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%, this is sort of what brought the tech bubble to a halt in 2000, which is that, you had 6% real rates. And so you can't own businesses that are projecting revenues, let alone profits in 2026.
When you can invest your money in a bond and make 6%.
6%.
And that's what I like. So just for folks that don't know, this week started with this big bond sell-off. And what that means is bonds that used to yield 0%, when you sell them, they're now yielding 10-year treasuries, I think, are at 1.5 points, right? And so as an investor, if I can make 1.5% with no risk by owning US treasuries over the next 10 years, that may feel like a better bet than owning some risky asset, some speculative company. Now, the other thing that it has done, and Chamath, correct me if I'm off on this, but what I'm hearing is that higher rate, because bonds sold down, because people are expecting inflation to come back up, the interest rates to borrow money are going up. And so if you're a hedge fund or an institutional money manager, over the last year or so, you've been able to borrow money for 0%. You can lever up your portfolio and buy as many stocks as you want without paying any interest on it. And now that rates are creeping back up, people are de-levering. They're taking risk off. And that's causing a sell-off in both bonds and stocks, and especially on the speculative end of the market where, there's been obviously unchecked kind of investment capital.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, look, at the end of the day, the cost of borrowing for a company goes up. What that's really saying is the investor that's lending them the money, has other alternatives, and so then they're willing to charge you more and more for this capital. And as that happens, you'll see some companies get into potentially some real trouble because, they're going to be borrowing money at rates where they can't necessarily generate the cash flows in the future to pay those things back. At the same time, as you said, if you look at sort of like, the SPAC market has taken a real beating. What are SPACs really? Well, in many ways, SPACs are synthetic bonds, right? And the reason is because, if you go and buy a SPAC, one share of any SPAC, you have the ability to redeem that if you don't like the deal that it does and get back your coupon. So, your notional rather. So if you were to buy a government, German bond at -1%, or buy any SPAC where you can put that same, $10 to work and get back $10, well, you do that versus getting back $9.90. So in many ways, like, the SPAC market benefited from rates at zero because you could synthetically be long SPACs as almost a way of being synthetically long fixed income. Now, as rates go up, that's not true. So what that leaves in the SPAC market are actually people who want to own long-term equity. And if you combine that with what we just said, which is the cost of capital going up and the discount rate going up, now all of a sudden companies need to be really real. And you're seeing that because if you look at the companies that have just announced SPAC deals just in the last few days, their stocks have gotten absolutely obliterated. And they're right on the knife's edge going into the redemption period. So if you have 1 or 2 more months of this where all of a sudden bonds look better and, some of these SPACs post-announcement but pre-de-SPACing go through, $10 a share, people will just redeem for $10. And you'll have a bunch of busted IPOs or mergers.
By the way, another thing we're seeing, sorry, Jason, but another thing I think we're seeing right now is in the near term is a feedback loop. So as selling takes place, what happens is market participants are jumping in and short selling and participating in the trend of that stock. And so there are these kind of experiences that are underway where it's not just about a sell-off of owners, but it's also about a momentum trade that a lot of people are playing into. And so there is a very short-term, extremely compounded effect of the delevering that's happening and the cycling that's happening in these markets. And so it's super volatile and probably will be for a little bit of time here, right?
I think so. I think we need to figure out whether there's really, whether there's a real inflation
risk
dragon cooking someplace. If there really is inflation, like, again, you have to think like the trillions of dollars we put into the economy eventually has to come out in productive goods and services. And all of that excess capital will probably inflate prices. Now, it begs a different question, which is we've just actually been missing inflation all along, because if you ask somebody who lives in a city, what the cost of rent has been, that thing has been inflating by feels like 20% a year for years. So
And healthcare and education costs.
And healthcare and education costs.
Ones, yeah.
So maybe we've just done a really terrible job in the last few years of actually measuring inflation the way it should be. It's calling this whole basket of, CPI X energy. It's kind of nutty. Maybe the whole thing just made no sense a few years ago.
Look, to David's point, and David gave me just a huge bag of red pills while we were off this week. So I've been on a bender on these red pills. But if you look at those three categories, what do they have in common? Education, healthcare, and housing, massive regulation. And then if you look at the things that have gone down, consumer goods, electronics, food, et cetera, or have stayed flat in terms of inflation, those are things that the free market participates in.
The government's not involved.
And it's not just the fact there's a lot of government regulation in things like healthcare and education. It's also that the government pays for a significant portion of it. And so there's no reason for the people, who are billing the government to keep costs down. This is why the price of education of a college degree keeps going up, is because the government's paying for a lot of it.
David, I think you may have seen this, but when we announced, our merger with Clover for IPOC, one of the first slides I put up there was the only place in the market since 2010 where you would have made more money than being long Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon was being long United Healthcare, Cigna, Wellspring. And the reason is because healthcare was this incredible thing post-Obamacare. Nobody wants to talk about it on the left because it makes it look terrible, but we created massive price inflation. And United Healthcare was a $30 billion company.
Narrative violation. Be careful.
Right before Obamacare passed. Today, it's a $330 billion company. And the level of growth that they and Aetna and, Cigna and Wellspring, these companies have seen is astounding. So these highly regulated, systems of societal infrastructure, that's where all the gains have been. Regulatory capture writ large.
Right. Well, as soon as the government is paying for it, all the suppliers know they can increase their prices. Why wouldn't they? So it's what happens is the government tries to make something free for people, and all they end up doing is making it really expensive.
Well, they make it expensive in this very convoluted way, which is hard to track, right? Because it's like, who's actually paying? Well, the insurance companies want to just book more revenue, even if they're even if their gross aggregate profit grows much, much more slowly, they'd rather make the same amount of profit on $1 billion versus $100 million. So what do? Their incentive is to just jack prices up. Who are paying those prices? Companies pay those prices. Who bears those costs? All of this stuff is really not clear because ultimately downstream, somebody has to pay for this stuff.
Taxpayers. And it's all obscurified. Look at the tent story that we were sharing on our group thread, $61,000 for San Francisco to put people into tents with a no big contract. One question I have for you all is, if we look back, the last time we were at 6% unemployment, July 2014, we look at the unemployment graph, it spiked up to, as we discussed, 15%, and it has plummeted back down now to the 6% rate. If we look back on this moment in time and how quickly the economy is recovering from this disaster that we've never experienced before, it looks like this recession is going to be recovered and we're already back in business in such a short period of time compared to what happened in the Great Recession and the dot-com boom. So is America and the US dollar and the economy anti-fragile now, to use a Taleb term? How do we look at what happened with the economy? Did Trump do everything right with the stimulus?
This is a complete outlier in the following way. In a typical recession, what has to happen is, so you have a contraction in the economy, but you don't know when the bottom is, right? The bottom is some number of months in the future. And government policy is basically trying to create a soft landing where all of a sudden the cost of capital is low enough now where people say, on the margin now, this incremental dollar, I would rather borrow and invest, which drives growth, which then gets the economy going. And so, how does a government deal with that? They are looking at economic data and saying, okay, you know what? Let me cut rates. I'll cut rates again. I'll cut rates again. And that's really the one tool that they have in their toolbox, because they're trying to predict in the future, how many rate cuts do I need to get, or have rather? How big do they need to be? Until I get to that place where you bottom out. The pandemic was the exact opposite because in many ways, we actually hit the bottom in month one because we said everything go to zero right now, right? When you shut everything down, you technically can't have less economic activity than zero.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, you price the bottom on day one, boom. And in hindsight, the real insight would have been to see that and say, I'm buying this moment because it only gets better from here. So in one ways, like all of the tools are actually now we need to think about them in opposite. And I don't think we have that training to do that well. So we're still going back to the same toolbox, which is why what David said is so true. We're thinking about incremental stimulus as like a way to get to a soft landing, but we've already actually taken the hard medicine a year ago.
So let's tackle that. Sachs, should we, and let's take virtue signaling and populism out of this discussion just on an economic basis. Is it necessary to send every American another 600,000, 2,000, knowing what we know today with the unemployment rate going down, or would we be better off taking that capital and deploying it in education, unemployment, or something else?
Well, first of all, it's 1.9 trillion that we don't have. We're borrowing it. I mean, I would extend unemployment for people in those hard hit sectors that haven't come back yet. But most of this money is going for blue state bailouts of cities that are totally mismanaged. This is not going to help states like California or cities like San Francisco get their house in order, because this is going to bail them out and defer that day of reckoning from their chronic mismanagement. So we're borrowing money we don't have to bail out cities and states that don't really deserve it. I do think we should help the people who've been impacted, but it doesn't require $2 trillion. And look, here's the thing. We're already down to 6% unemployment. We're going to be down to, I'd say, probably 3 or 4% in 2 quarters. I mean, the economy is coming roaring back. And the reason it's coming roaring back is because COVID is ending, right? So the biggest announcement recently, and I think this is playing into what's happening in the stock market as well, is that Biden announced that every American who's over the age of 16 who wants a vaccine will be able to get one by the end of May. By end of May. I mean, we're going to have 300 million doses.
Yeah.
Right. Well, he was
6 months off this.
When he came in office in January, he's saying the worst is not over. I mean, that was clearly sandbagging. The worst was over. And we're going to have 300 million doses by the end of May. And the only reason why everybody won't be able to get one is because of states that are, creating these ridiculous hoops to get through.
Confiscating them.
Yeah, exactly. Like California right now has 3 million doses sitting on a shelf because of all the crazy hoops that Gavin Newsom has everyone going through because he wants to score brownie points on equity, right? So if the government would just get out of the way, let everyone who wants to get a vaccine get one without worrying about making sure the exact right person in the exact right line gets one first, this thing will be over by Memorial Day. Over. Now, look, there'll still be a case here or there. For sure, I'm not saying there'll be 0 cases of COVID, but there'll be 0 pandemic, understood as such.
By the way, I'll also say one other, important point about the stimulus one that Sachs made. Yesterday, the CBO put out a projection. This is the budget office at I think Congress, and they said that the U.S. national debt is likely to reach 202% of GDP by 2051. So the amount of debt that the U.S. government will own is 2x the amount of all the revenue generated by all of the industries in the U.S. In about 30 years. That's an insane statistic. And the reason that people look at GDP or debt to GDP is because you have to pay your debt down at some point. So you owe some interest on that debt. You have to pay it down. And every year you have to generate revenue to pay the bondholders. And how does the federal government generate revenue? It either issues more debt or taxes. And in order to meet a 202% level of debt relative to GDP, you end up raising taxes so significantly as a percent of GDP to cover the interest payments and the principal payments every year that you end up stalling out the economy, cutting important services, et cetera. And so we're in a circumstance now where the benefit we're going to get from taking on this additional debt relative to economic growth and stimulus doesn't actually outweigh the cost of that debt. And we're facing a fiscal crunch at some point in the next decade or two. And there is this big question mark outstanding right now on a global stage. Is the dollar really the safest place to be? Does everyone really want to be dollar denominated if this is the circumstance that the U.S. federal government is going to be facing?
Here's a question for Chamath that I'm curious about. If the government is buying all this debt, shouldn't they be buying some amount of equity as well so they can profit from?
Well, the government's issuing debt, Jason.
No, I know, but isn't the government also going into the market and buying up corporate debt through all of this? And shouldn't they have profits coming from that?
So there was a risk last year where, corporates may not have been able to fund their obligations. And so the government basically said, we're going to be the buyer of last resort and step in. And it's effectively what they did was they essentially froze the credit markets, because if you were going to then bet on some of these companies not being able to raise capital, you would have gone to the worst part of the stack, or you would have bet actually that there was going to be the state transition. So meaning debt is very tightly scripted as, AAA plus, AA, A minus. And these transitions from these tiers of like investment grade to junk to whatever are huge events. And basically the government said, nope, everybody take your chips and go home, because we are going to backstop companies like Ford or whoever, folks that were teetering. And so they effectively said, this is going to be, until I tell you otherwise, a rigged game. I'm going to make sure I backstop these things. These companies will always be able to have money.
So my question though, Chamath, is if the government is going to do that and take that risk, shouldn't they get some warrants or some upside in the company's future success to then create a virtuous cycle here that if they did backstop it, maybe they had warrants for 5% of the company, like you would give if you were doing a debt instrument?
They could probably do it if they were a direct lender, and they had that chance, and they didn't really do it in 2008 when they did it. I mean, maybe they could have done it in a better way. Here, when you enter the open market, there's no such contract, and so you can't negotiate that. Look, I want to sort of talk about something slightly related to this, which is if you actually looked at that $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, the thing that makes the most sense, and I think nobody would complain about, was saying, let's give a means-based test where the poorest Americans get the most money, call it 5,000 or 6,000, and the richest Americans get nothing. And I think nobody would disagree with that. And if you added up all of that money, it's probably on the order of $500 or $700 billion. If you did a really expansive package, and I think people would, all of us would raise our hands and say, we shouldn't get a fucking dime.
Well,
And
right.
other people should be getting many multiples of 1,400.
Well, why should anybody who wasn't impacted, Sachs, get anything? Like if you were not impacted,
of course,
you didn't lose your job, you're staying home, you're not spending money. Why should you get anything? Because I think that's all the money going into NFTs and making bets on GameStop and doing all this, shenanigans with Bitcoin.
Of course. Look, this is Rahm Emanuel 2.0. Remember Rahm Emanuel back in the 2008-2009 financial crisis said, never let a crisis go to waste. This is now never let a crisis reach its end. Right? They don't want it to be over because this crisis is a justification. Segue. Yeah, this crisis is the justification for this piggy bank of spending that this wish list that they wanted to pass for a long time. Very little of it actually has to do with helping the people.
Very little. In fact, if you actually look at the breakdown of this $1.9 trillion bill, it's every typical bill. It has a better title, but ultimately, it's a bunch of pork barrel spending.
By the way, there's a bunch of insanity in there, like COVID testing. I mean, guess what? We don't need to test anyone for COVID in about 30 to 60 days. Yeah, you can throw those
tests away. We needed them 6 months ago.
There's a couple $1 billion we could save, and the list goes on. But I think the point is, what Sachs is making is totally true. We're continuing to latch on to the COVID pandemic crisis as a means to an end. And we're not really solving any problems that are outstanding. As the COVID pandemic and the risks, remember, let's just go back a year. If you guys remember, the reason we shut down the economy was to flatten the curve. There was no assumption we were going to end COVID. The idea was, let's make sure that the healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed with people dying, where we can't handle as many people in ICU beds. And now we're in a situation where we're saying you still can't go outside. ICU beds are largely open. You still have to do X and Y and Z. We still need to be testing everyone. And all of those risks and considerations should be coming off the table as more people have had COVID and more people have gotten vaccinated. And instead, we're using the fear that's been embedded in us over the past year as a mechanism to drive spending in a way that is clearly economically unsustainable, ultimately counterproductive, and unfortunately is being used as a mechanism for keeping folks in office and paying back their friends and all this other sort of nonsense that's going on.
Friedberg, you had a breakdown of by the way, because it's not just the federal stimulus bill, the California breakdown of what they spent.
Insane.
Do you have that? Do you have that, or can you fill it up?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to send the link because it was through a FOIA request. They were forced to list it. So California had an emergency declaration.
Joke, a total fucking joke.
Through that emergency declaration, it gave the governor the power and the ability to enter into no-bid contracts to meet the demands of the quote-unquote emergency. And the contracts that were entered into are all publicly listed and available in a link that I will share with you guys, and it'll be available online. I don't think a reporter has done what needs to be done, which is to go through those contracts and identify how much money was spent on what and where that and why that money was spent and who ended up benefiting from it. Some of these contracts, including, for example, $1.9 billion to PerkinElmer to provide nasal swabs and other, reactive chemistry needed to run COVID tests with an overflow capacity of their lab of 4,000 tests a day, which, by the way, costs a few $1,000s, for $1.9 billion. And ultimately, California didn't really do any of the testing. It was done by private labs. Where did that $1.9 billion go? Uh-oh. There was another amount of money. There was $100 million spent on Accenture to build the vaccination website. No bid contract. $100 million for a friggin' 3-page website.
That website in a weekend?
There was the Carbon Health guy did. There was another separately for his own vaccination program that he was running, which obviously highlights just how inept this whole process is. There was another incredible multi-$100 million contract entered into for a guy, and then I looked up his address on Google Maps and I looked at his home and his office. It's in like a strip mall next to a donut shop, and this guy is the guy. He's technically a doctor, but not really a practicing doctor, who got paid hundreds of millions of dollars to source overflow hospital and doctor capacity for prisons in California. Insane, the shit that's in there. And so, the total kind of, I think, mismanagement of capital and obviously inability to kind of manage through a crisis, get taken advantage of. Yeah. By the way, I think the federal COVID stimulus looks very similar in terms of the pork and other nonsense that's going on in there.
Hey, mainstream media, instead of fucking grinding me about, a couple $100 million of share sales so that I can allocate it to fucking climate change, why don't you do your goddamn job and fucking tell this story?
Yeah, no, because this would take work.
What a joke.
And you don't get virtue signaling points.
What a joke.
I'll post the link now.
David, I need more red pills.
What a joke.
Get me those red pills from Miami.
So there's one article, like, you're right, Chamath, like there's so many scandals. By the way, there was one just reported in the San Francisco Chronicle about how the city of San Francisco paid $16 million to pay for something like 260 tents or something like that. Tents for homeless people. It was $61,000.
That's the entire budget of Burning Man.
It was $61,000 per tent.
You could build an ADU for that.
Guys, I have an entire gaggle of reporters sweating every single fucking share that I buy or sell. And these people, no, I don't. It's fucking stupid. And there's trillions of dollars just swashing around.
Right.
Like what? Are we some third world fucking banana republic?
Kinda.
Go ahead, Zach.
San Francisco is, that's for sure.
All this money was dished out according to no bid contracts. So basically there was not a competitive bidding process because it was a COVID emergency. And so, yeah, look, I mean, all of Newsom's big backers in the healthcare industry got these giant no-bid contracts. These, the homeless industrial complex service providers in San Francisco got these giant contracts. None of it was bid out. And the politicians would love to be able to keep this going because they've never had more power. They've never had more degrees of freedom to reward their political supporters. So, I think there was one really good article I just want to bring up here. That was by Jonathan Chait.
Oh, this is called, the intelligentsia in the New Yorker.
Yeah.
The New York magazine. NY
New York Magazine. So, his article is called Zero COVID Risk is the Wrong Standard. And he defines a term called Zeroism. What Chait writes is he describes Zeroism as the following. He says, Zeroism is an inability to conceive of public health measures in cost-benefit terms. The pandemic becomes an enemy that must be destroyed at all costs, and any compromise could lead to death and is therefore unacceptable. So in other words, if like one person might die, then we need to continue all these emergency measures. And this is the thing is that, look, COVID as a pandemic is going to be over by June. Okay. But there will always be cases of COVID. It's going to return as a seasonal illness. And the question is, are we going to allow zeroism to be the policy every year where we basically give these politicians unlimited power to do lockdowns, shutdowns, no bid contracts, and on and on and on? You already see with the teachers unions, right? The education unions are refusing to go back to work even after their members are vaccinated. Yeah, saying that there must be 14 days of no, meaning zero community spread before they can safely return. So the teachers unions or the education unions are saying is, we're not going to go back to work. We want paid vacation until there's zero cases.
Can I just say,
this is not realistic.
I mean, I went to get my daughter's passport updated at USPS. They're working. While I was driving there, I saw all kinds of infrastructure. It was happening. We pay into a system that's supposed to guarantee in return some level of commitment by individuals that buy into that same system. Teachers are part of that.
Yes.
You can't have a get out of jail free card whenever you want to just say, no, we're going to change the rules. But it applies to everybody else. The firefighters have to show up. The cops have to show up. The ambulance people have to show up. The nurses show up. You know, the
Uber
USPS
drivers, BART, train conductors,
shows
everybody's
up,
going to work. But these people,
the fucking teachers,
the teachers should, parents should take their kids out of school. That's what they should do. And then
do what, Jason? How are most people
basically? Well, if you got 5 or 6 parents together,
Jason, people work.
Yeah.
No, but if you got 5 or 6 parents together and
they don't have time for that shit.
Jason, what are you talking about? This is not
let me
fucking normal.
finish my sentence.
Okay,
5 or 6 parents get together, and if they had, what do you call it when you give parents a little bit of money for school? Voucher systems. The voucher system would then create the competition. If 6 or 7 families could get 5, 10K each and then run their own little bubble school, their micro school, this could actually put pressure on the teachers.
Well, it's not going to happen, but you actually have a pretty good point. What Newsom should do is he should go to these unions and say, listen, if you're not going to go back and you're not going to teach, no problem. We're going to take the money that we give to your schools and give them out as vouchers and let the parents do what they want. In other words, we're going to break your union. That is
Correct.
what he needs to do.
It's time to break the union.
The problem with Newsom is that his biggest contributor, the single biggest contributor, is the education union, right? And so look, he has publicly said that, yes, I'm in favor of schools reopening, but it's not enough for you to espouse the opinion that schools should go back. I mean, you're the governor. You need to go make that happen. You need to go tell the teachers unions, you must go back right now because there is no incremental COVID risk to the teachers. They've seen this now that states which have open schools have not seen an increase in COVID. There is no science to support this. He needs to tell them, go back right now or we're going to break your union. He will not do that because he's an employee of those unions. And by the way, I have an update. I have an update on the recall if you guys want it.
No, wait. Let's get to it in 1 second because I do want to. I do want to just say. Well, first off, I want to make an observation that we are turning into the rational Rush Limbaugh. We're all kind of yelling in violent agreement.
Yes. But it's infuriating.
It's kind of a little bit silly. But I am just observing the tone here a little bit. I will say, like, if you guys remember, we talked about this like last year, which is, what will life be like post-COVID, post the pandemic? And if you guys remember, I said this and I still firmly believe it. And I think we're now seeing it play out, which is that the fear that gets created by the actual crisis will persist in terms of the subconscious behavior of the population for a long period of time. That's what happened after 9/11. The insanity that went on with the TSA and security checking and racism against brown people and everything that arose post 9/11 persisted for a very long time as a result of the shock that we all experienced. And I don't think people were very cognizant of it occurring. It was just like, oh, well, this is now the normal way of life. Everyone is so fearful of catching COVID and they've been so kind of trained and told that they're going to die from COVID that we're finding ourselves in a circumstance where anything can then be rationalized. And those of folks that then have power and the ability can magnify the circumstances into something that it seems kind of shocking and absurd if you put on kind of a rational hat. But this is just one manifestation of what I think will be the case. We all know people that have been vaccinated that are more than 2 weeks since their second shot of vaccination, who are still scared of doing things like being around other people or going into grocery stores because, quote unquote, there may be a chance that there may be a variant that may not work on the vaccine that I may get that may end up killing me. And if you actually do the math on it and you think about it rationally, you're not going to get COVID and you're not going to die, but there's a chance. Therefore, I'm going to change my behavior. And that's part of what I think we're seeing manifest at a very large scale is this like trained fear mind that we all have at this point, and policy and everything. And by the way, the $1.9 trillion stimulus is in part kind of empowered by this fear that we all have.
I disagree slightly. So look, is there going to be some PTSD from COVID? Yeah, I'm sure there will be, but I think people are ready to get out and with a vengeance. And I think people want to, and the problem is not that people are afraid, but that the people doing the health establishment doing the messaging is not out there telling us the right things. I mean, you've got Fauci out there telling people that even after they're vaccinated, they cannot take off their masks until 2022. That they're not going to be able to dine. No, seriously. They're not going to be able to dine indoors. They can't go to a movie, a concert, or a sporting event. And they can't socialize indoors except with other also vaccinated people. This is what Fauci is saying. I mean, so no wonder you've got so many people out there saying that they're going to wait and see whether the vaccine works or not. Well, because effectively Fauci and the health establishment, they're being so cautious in their guidance. They're effectively giving anti-vax messaging. They're basically saying that the vaccines don't work very well, which is just stupid. I mean,
they should be going out saying nobody has died who has been gotten a shot. Nobody has gone to the ICU who's gotten vaccinated.
What they need to say,
nobody's been on a ventilator who's been vaccinated. Right. Am I correct with those three statements, David?
Yes. They need to say no
deaths, no ICU, no ventilator if you have the shot.
What we need to be saying is very simple, which is if you've been vaccinated, you will not die. If you've been vaccinated, you will not die. Put that on a billboard and everyone's going to want to get vaccinated. You know, only 55% of the population right now says that they're going to get vaccinated as soon as they can.
I'm ordering a billboard right now from the besties. I think that just says, if you're vaccinated, you won't die, the besties.
I think it's pretty reasonable that individuals would still be afraid, you know, because I think we learned over the last year that we can't trust the institutions that are supposed to tell us in an objective way, meaning you can't trust the WHO, you can't trust NIH, you can't trust the CDC, you can't necessarily trust the Surgeon General, you couldn't trust the president. Very complicated, right? So I think it's reasonable that people are skeptical. What I think is unreasonable is when, you know, sort of like organized unions or organizations or corporations who have a responsibility to run the infrastructure of this country basically say, all these rules apply to everybody else but me. That's where I think we have to really just kind of question ourselves and fix that. That's not cool. It's just fundamentally not reasonable.
So we have Biden saying that everyone who wants a vaccine will be able to get one by the end of May. We have Gavin Newsom saying that most of the state, but not all of it, will reopen in August. Well, wait a second. You know, May, June, July, August. Why is there like a 3-month gap here? It's because of the zeroism. I mean, I think Newsom has embraced the zeroism.
If not
philosophy.
Zeroism, what's the number? We have 8,000 people die a day in America on average, historically.
Well, as soon as everyone,
if it's under 500 deaths a day, should we be going back?
That's not even the question. Once everyone can get a vaccine, it's over. If you choose not to get the vaccine, like, sorry, it's on you. We're moving on. It's like, dude,
we're done.
Can I ask a question?
By the way, the equivalent of zeroism would be no one's allowed to drive a car because people die in cars all the time.
All cars have to be 35 miles an hour.
Or no one's allowed to drink alcohol because alcohol has some adverse effect or increases chance of cancer or whatever. At some point, like, do you end up?
You just triggered Chamath.
Chamath.
No wine.
Nice Bordeaux and Burgundy doesn't give you cancer.
No.
What's going on with the wine budget post-spacocalypse?
I mean, it's going to take a lot of more billions before I stop drinking my wine. Question. I want to throw this into the scrum. What do you guys think about? By the way, I mean, also, we're all just so punchy because we didn't talk last week. So
totally.
we're all so agitated.
We're all a little excited.
None of us have gotten to talk. All of our wives have been telling us what to do. We had nobody to vent with, and now we're just going crazy.
It's like a bunch of 12-year-old boys who are on timeout.
It's like we've been in a 2-week timeout.
We need to get our bikes and go for a bike ride.
No, guys. Honestly, like, have you guys? Like, I have not gotten a word in edgewise with Nat for 2 weeks, and I was so looking forward to talking to you guys. I'm like, I want to talk. No, but listen. What do you guys think about the biological Patriot Act thing? You know, there's these vaccination passports that people are talking about. I just want to get a sense of where you guys think this is going and
this
what
is
you think
this
about
is the slippery slope that I think ends all slippery slopes with respect to privacy, right? So I think it was proposed in the EU that you would need to get a digitally verified kind of passport stamp that shows that you have been vaccinated in order to travel freely amongst other EU nations. And so if you think about the implications of this, now the government or governments have the ability to demand that in order for you to move around freely, you need to represent something digitally or represent something about some healthcare procedure that you may or may not want to kind of, take on. So everyone kind of nods their head and says that seems totally reasonable and rational. It's COVID. We're all at risk. We should protect ourselves.
No.
I want to yada, yada. But where does this go next, right? Because then it becomes, well, have you had your measles vaccine? Or, hey, do you have herpes and therefore you have to show someone your herpes passport if you want to have sex with them, or, end up kind of going to a point where we really don't have a barrier between what's private and what's nationalized, or even super nationalized in the context of the EU. And is there kind of a slippery slope that emerges by allowing this amount of invasiveness of personal decision making and personal data and making it available to government agencies in order to have access to the liberties that you believe may be endowed to you as an individual citizen of the world?
So what do you do? What do we do?
Well, I just think proposals like this I think they're going to fade away very quickly once COVID is over. And the real issue we have right now is that not enough of the population wants to get vaccinated because, again, the health authorities are being much too conservative in their guidance. So, there's some polling numbers on this so only 15% of the public are actually opposed to getting the vaccine. Like you could kind of call them anti-vax, but there's another 20 to 30% that are taking this wait and see approach. And, they're going to make sure that like other people go first and don't sprout tails or antlers or something before, they're going to be willing to get it. But the reason why they're all waiting and seeing is because you've got, Fauci and others saying that we're not going to have normalcy until Christmas or maybe even 2022. So if that's the case, if things aren't going to be normal till next year, why wouldn't you wait? And I think what we need to be saying is, look, go get the vaccine. Everyone who wants it's going to be able to get it in the next 2 months. And COVID is over. It's over, guys.
But Sachs, if there is a digital passport requirement in the EU, where do you think that goes? Like if you have to show proof of a vaccination in order to enter the EU without quarantine, where does this go?
It's not a great precedent, but I don't know that it's going to be necessary because I just think that COVID's going to end so quickly.
I like Sachs's point of view, which is if you decide you're not going to do this, then you've put yourself at risk. But if nobody else can die from it, why do we need to check it? I understand like maybe in this bridge period, spring to summer, if you go to a Warriors game or a Knicks game where you want to go to Burning Man or the EDC, Electronic Daisy Carnival, whatever Freeberg goes to, when he goes to his raves. I mean, Freeberg at a rave is kind of the video we need to see, I think. But why would that's fine with me in the short term, but in the long term, I don't want to give them that power. Look what happened with the Patriot Act and then them monitoring our data forever and the government being able to put, what Snowden found out, like they were able to put on the AT&T backbone, the ability to sniff all data. I mean, it's overreaching.
Last January or February, I think, Jason, it was one of our first pods where I kind of put this marker out there on this biological Patriot Act and I said it's coming. I'm going to put another marker out there, by the way, because there may be something like this in New York. I think most cities will have to have them. I think places, Jason, exactly as you say, for sporting events, for concerts, it'll be very hard as the number of strains increase, as the severity ebbs and flows over time, for us to not end up in this place. And I think it will be because certain people will feel a paternalistic desire to sort of, it'll come from a good place. Like I want to help everybody, but they'll pass a law and that law will just get perturbed and it'll create all kinds of crazy consequences. But I want to put another chit out there, which is, there was a really important civil rights case called Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission. It went to the Supreme Court and it was basically a guy who owned a bakery and he refused, I think it was, to make a cake for a same-sex couple. And ultimately, the decision was, yeah, he's allowed. The Supreme Court gave a very narrow ruling that he was allowed to withhold service. And I asked this question, which is, well, what is the difference, frankly, between withholding service from a same-sex couple or withholding service from somebody that isn't vaccinated? Because, in the eyes of the business person, assuming apparently you're allowed to make these kinds of, judgments. Because you're a private business. The implications, I think, are really vast. And so I'm just going to put it out there that I think that it's actually, David, I'll take the other side. So I think that there's going to be these biological Patriot Acts, unfortunately. And then the second thing that I'll say is that I do think that it will get litigated to the Supreme Court. And I think that narrowly, what will come down is that businesses will be able to decide. And I think this is actually what will put the vaccination or anti-vaccination movement to the forefront, because I think in this complex global world where we don't know where diseases come from, except we know that they are more communicable, they can be more deadly, and they're more pervasive, and they spread faster just because of the nature in which the world is set up. There's probably going to be less and less tolerance for anti-vaccination. Now, that may slow down the actual process of getting vaccines to market, because we'll want to make it even safer if we're going to do forced vaccinations of certain things. But I'm just going to put a chit out there that I think that's coming.
I don't know that we need to force people to get vaccinated, but I think that we need to recognize that once people have the option of getting vaccinated, there's no need to have the same public policy response, right? So look, if Biden's correct that we're going to have 300 million doses by the end of May, and I think he must be correct because he's been very conservative in his guidance, then we should declare a date certain for the end of COVID. I'm not saying that the virus won't exist. I'm not saying there won't be a smattering of cases. I'm saying from a public policy perspective, there's no longer a panic, a raging pandemic to justify these incredible new powers that the government has asserted.
I mean, what would you do that based on? The number of shots in arms or the number of deaths per day?
No, once everyone can get the vaccine, and then I think that'll be by Memorial Day. Availability. So, I mean, look, what we should say, and it will be available as long as, governors like Newsom get out of the way and stop restricting the administration of it. But I think we need to declare a date certain where we say, listen, on June 1st, there is no more justification for government having these extraordinary powers to lock us down, to require us. I don't think we even need to wear masks beyond June 1st. And by the way, I was pro-mask. I was in favor of a mask mandate a year ago, as you guys know. But there's no need for it after June 1st. There's no need to have these crazy,
certainly not if you're vaccinated, right, Freeberg? Like, I mean, you wouldn't.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I just, I think it's a good point that Sachs is making. It's easy for people to say, let's wear a mask and protect ourselves. But if you don't care about wearing a mask, but there are plenty of people who do. And I think the question is, at what point do we allow liberty to kind of play a role here? And it's not just about, what one person's point of view, which, by the way, turned out to be wrong multiple times over the last year, is in terms of what they think that other people should do. And, what does it mean to actually have freedom of choice and liberty? It's a really fundamental question. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look at states, that is a key. We have Texas has opened up and said no mask mandate. One of the things that hurt us in this was we didn't have a centralized government dictating everything. And now we see hey, maybe having states make individual decisions
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I'll say something about this that I think is important. It may be true that masks stop community spread of the virus, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we stop the spread of the virus. The virus still spread. We still had a lot of viral cases in the United States. We had a lot of deaths that arose. And whatever restrictions we put in place, people still made the choice to go into other people's homes, take their mask off, enjoy free air, enjoy drinks, and give each other the virus. And that's where so much of the spread occurred.
I think you guys are not confronting this really obvious thing. I think this masterpiece cake shop thing is a really important concept. Like, what happens? I'm just going to use an extreme example.
If it goes to the Supreme Court, you mean?
No, let's just say that, Google's engineers unionize and they decide that, they want everybody else at Google to be vaccinated. And then Google says, yeah, you're right. If you want to work at Google, you need to be vaccinated. Not just
private
for COVID.
Company. Private company.
Not just for COVID. It's a private company. Not just for COVID.
By the way, that is a rule at schools, right? I mean, I think my preschool where my kid goes here in San Francisco requires proof of vaccination for the kids in order for them to go to school.
Traveling seems to be different. And see, traveling in some places is on public infrastructure, some on private infrastructure.
I know,
right?
but just focus on this issue. What happens if private organizations pass a decision that you have to be vaccinated? It'll go to the Supreme Court, and if you look at Masterpiece, they'll win. They will come out with the right to say that,
which is fine. You can go work somewhere else.
Why is that a problem? Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm just curious how this plays out. If only half the population of America.
Well, maybe they'll lose good engineers, and the free market will resolve itself. Where Google will end up saying, you know what, we're not going to pass this mandate because all the good engineers are going to leave. So let's just leave it be.
I'm more worried about the politicians trying to hold the government trying to hold on to the power that it's asserted over us over the past year, even after COVID's no longer a threat.
I don't want them having a database of my medical records. No effing
and
way.
So this is why, look, I think we need to declare a date certain that COVID as a pandemic is over. My date is Memorial Day. It's very clear to me that once everyone has the vaccine, it's over.
Just make it when you can walk up.
This is when, so I actually think that the Newsom recall, which will be going on this summer, this is what that election is going to turn into, in my opinion. So by the way, can I give a quick update on?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I talked to the recall people this morning. They're up to 1.95 million signatures.
He's done.
So 50,000 votes short of 2 million. They will be at or over 2 million in 2 weeks, which is the end of the signature period. Their validation rate is about 84%. So I think this is clearly going to pass. There will be a recall election. It will be around August. Now, fast forward. Newsom has said the state won't reopen until August, but I think that by May, June, July, you will see just about every other state reopen. Obviously, Texas is already completely reopened, but even blue states like Connecticut have now lifted lockdowns. They still have a mask mandate for the time being. But I think what you could see by this summer is that California will look like a laggard. You'll see that politicians like Newsom are holding on to this zeroist philosophy. They're being too restrictive. They look ridiculous compared to other states. And he still probably won't have an agreement with the teachers unions to go back to school. And I think this could become the big issue in the recall
You want to make
election.
an announcement, Sachs? You want to make an announcement now? We have a special announcent.
I mean, Chamath might be taking Chamath might be taking a hiatus from work, given where the markets are at.
I thought this governor thing would be value destructive. It looks like actually I would have saved money.
You would have sold all your positions.
Okay, I'm back. Fuck it. I'm doing it again. I'm back in.
Positions. I mean,
oh my
God. I don't mean to be cynical, but if you
I am losing so much
down
money.
in your state, Sachs, they can't collect signatures at the supermarket or at restaurants or Disneyland. So maybe Newsom shut everything down so that you couldn't collect SIGs.
Well, it's interesting because they actually found that direct mail was a very effective way of getting signatures. Ooh. So they've gotten around that. But
Gavin Newsom is cutting the budget of the U.S. Postal Service.
No, look, Newsom is definitely, there's going to be a recall election. I think it'll be around August. And now there's recall efforts underway for Chesa Boudin.
The killer DA?
The killer DA of San Francisco. As well as Gascon in LA and the San Francisco School Board. But we got to talk. Yeah, we got to talk about how Boudin responded to our last pod, right?
Oh my Lord.
David, I have 3 comments to say before we talk about Boudin. Number 1, I've never seen you more energetic. Did you get
where are you?
The red pills, man. He went to Miami.
Did you download a 4th emotion? Did you download a 4th emotion?
He's in Palm Beach. He's been at the massage parlor every morning.
No, it's like
feeling
a build-up. You're right. It's like a build-up over the last 2 weeks. It's like a,
big release.
Too much energy.
Yeah. I mean, how little have you spoken in the last 2 weeks? Has Jacqueline spoken the entire 2 weeks straight? I know what that feels like. So
you're right. I need the bestie therapy. I didn't realize I needed this.
Yeah, absolutely, bestie therapy. So does the audience.
Jake Al Freeberg, you don't know this, but Saxy and I called each other on Friday and we spoke for half an hour and like as it was a podcast. Just back and forth.
You can conference call on an iPhone.
We were so lonely. He actually conference called all 4 of us. I picked up and we spoke for half an hour. It felt like a mini pod. It was so wonderful.
Oh my God.
God.
You know what? Men are too proud to go to therapy, so they start podcasts.
I was telling a friend of mine, I was telling a friend, like, this podcast was kind of one of the surprising joys of my life over the last year. It really felt like a great kind of...
Wait a second, you got the Joy? Oh,
I had Joy.
Your Joy. We did have
you downloaded Joy?
Yeah, I acknowledge Joy now.
Okay.
They're both smiling. Wow, it's incredible.
Okay, Sax, go tell us about Boudin.
Yeah, tell us about Boudin.
Let me find the tweet. So basically, remember on the last pod 2 weeks ago, Chesa was supposed to be on our pod. He canceled. And so then in response to that, Jason, hold the chicken noises for a couple of minutes here. Hold on. So I responded to Chesa saying, listen, you don't have to come on our pod, but I'll challenge you to debate. Let's do a debate, whatever format you want. And we posted it on Twitter. So he didn't respond, but by the way, it got like 180,000 views. So a lot of people watched the challenge. And so, but the crazy thing is, instead of responding directly, Chesa had a high school friend and campaign worker post a blog responding to me, which, and Jason got mentioned too, but it was crazy. It was like, why wouldn't you just respond directly? Anyway, he had this shill respond. And what he basically said was, in this response was he cited all these charging statistics, and he tried to claim that Chesa has charged just as many cases as the previous DA. The problem with that is charging doesn't really mean anything, because you can charge someone and then plead the charges down from a felony to a misdemeanor. It doesn't mean that the person was actually punished. It doesn't mean that you locked anybody up. It doesn't mean that you actually got a conviction to a serious crime or protected the public from anything. The real question is not chargings, but dispositions of cases. And that's that's the data that we need. And I know there's a bunch of reporters who are trying to get that data, and Chesa's office won't give it to them. And so, I would challenge this, this little, Chesa volunteer, go find out, what is the real data on, how many felony charges have been pleaded down to misdemeanors, right? How many felonies have actually been prosecuted? How many felony convictions
it's interesting
has
you
Chesa
bring this
secured?
Up. It's interesting you bring this up. If you do a search for GoFundMe Chesa Boudin, the number one result should be the GoFundMe page I started. It now has 455 donors and $54,000 in funding. And so I am withdrawing the $54,000, and I have a meeting with the woman from the Marina Times, who's done great coverage of this. And I'm also looking for some data scientists. And I'm going to give the money minus some insurance for when Chesa sues me and some errors and omissions insurance. And I'm going to be giving the $50,000 to a journalist or a data scientist, or they can spend it however they want to attack this very issue, which is just put more sunlight on it. And so Chesa Boudin is not happy with me. He's not happy with Sachs, but we are going to put the spotlight on him. And it will be through journalism, and it will be through constant pressure. And you can help. If you want to donate $100, go just donate it to that. I'm not taking any money, obviously.
This is a really interesting civics experiment, I think, for the rest of the country. And I want to say that I don't know enough of these details. I go up to San Francisco every now and then. I've not liked what I've seen.
It's scary.
And it's great that you guys are standing up for your city. The thing is, I wonder how much of these recall movements now will pick up steam, not just here, but wherever else they're allowable all around the country. I mean, the San Francisco Board of Education spent all this time and money, basically navel gazing on the renaming of schools. And then finally, just because they were just so utterly embarrassed, basically had to bag that. Could you imagine that in the most technically advanced and most progressive city in the world, basically, with the kinds of companies and people that we have here, that's what people were thinking about during the middle of a pandemic when children were at home? Okay, you have this DA who's going to get basically recalled. In Los Angeles, you have a DA that's going to get recalled. In California, you have an entire, governor of the state that's going to get recalled. So what are we learning? We're learning that people can actually, small numbers of people can be extremely effective at getting change done. Good for you guys.
That they represent us, and that the distance between what the public clearly wants and what some of these bought and paid for radically insane people, both on the left and the right, that needs to stop. And if people are, going to not listen to their constituents, we need to stop them.
People want centrism. They want simple centrism.
100%. Reason. People want reason.
Yeah, the silliness is that the San Francisco Board of Education people are elected. When have any of you or any of the people that I know in San Francisco ever actually looked up who's the person on the Board of Education? It's not really a topic that people have paid much attention to. And I think that this experience, when you don't pay attention from a civic perspective on who your elected officials are and take an action in electing them, you wake up when a crisis like this occurs and you're like, oh shit, maybe I should pay attention the next time there's an election. And maybe I should be more active and be more thoughtful. Or maybe we should end up in a situation where you allow the mayor or the board of supervisors to appoint the board and have an approval process where there's a little bit more kind of, not just anyone that wants to get elected puts themselves on the ballot, gets elected. No one really pays attention to who's getting elected. And then you wake up to this crisis.
Isn't it true that like in the Board of Education, there was the whole thing came to a head because they were trying to like staff a committee again to waste time on some bullshit.
Yeah.
And some guy raised his hand, and he happened to be this gay person in a mixed cultural marriage, I think, and he wanted to be a part of this committee, and he had been kind of like a really good, thoughtful participant. And they said no because he wasn't diverse enough or something.
Yes, that's exactly what happened. There was a school board meeting. It started at 4 p.m. Okay, 4 p.m. And this was the first issue they discussed, is whether like you said, this gay white man was diverse enough to be on a committee. It was a committee where he was volunteering his time.
His good time.
Everybody thought that he'd be additive. I mean, everybody liked him, but they spent several hours debating whether they should put him on for diversity reasons.
Because he wasn't woke enough.
Right, exactly. Then they spent their time talking about renaming schools and taking Abraham Lincoln's names off schools, and even renaming schools. They didn't even know why certain names were what they were.
They got the people wrong.
They got the people wrong. And then basically they didn't even get to the issue of school reopening until midnight. So 8 hours later. And then everyone basically had gone to bed and the meeting ended. I mean, literally, this is what happened. And so the parents.
It's like an SNL skit. It's like insane.
It's insane. And so, the parents are up in arms, and this is triggering a recall movement because the parents just want the schools reopened. And you keep getting these responses from the school board where they keep saying, oh, we're listening to your concerns or whatever. They keep trying to process them, but they're not doing anything about it, and then they say, well, in order for us to reopen, we need to establish our testing infrastructure, and we're putting an RFP out for that. And blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what are you talking about? Private schools have reopened. Just reopen, just reopen.
What do you guys think about Joe Biden's first sort of 60 days in office?
Executing at a high level with the vaccine. I mean, opening up all those FEMA sites and getting to 2 million shots a day on average is undeniably great. The fact that he used the War Powers Act to force Merck and to do the Johnson & Johnson and to work with Johnson & Johnson to increase production, undeniable. I'm not happy about the teachers and him kowtowing to the teachers, and I'm not happy about just the hint that he wants to start the war machine up again. So,
bombing Syria. Who here wants to bomb Syria? It's like a rite of passage.
I don't want to drop bombs on anybody anymore.
Where the fuck is Syria? Does anybody know? I mean, what are we doing?
I mean, those are the key issues for me. There's the teachers and the bombings. I don't want that.
I'd say I give him an 8 out of 10, Jason, because I think the pandemic has been so well handled by him and Zients and that team. I think they've done a very good job. But those two things are huge black marks for me. Like, and Bloomberg ripped him one, and Mike Bloomberg was on TV and he was just like, that is a joke. The teachers unions are jokes, and you need to basically tear these people to the ground. And you cannot allow these folks to hold an entire generation of kids hostage. Okay.
It's disgusting.
But then, I think it was the same day or the day after, unfortunately, Biden kind of capitulated to the teachers union. Not cool. And then the bombing of Syria was kind of like, why?
Let's use sanctions. Let's use money. I mean, the legacy of Trump, I think, not starting wars was the one thing, and then him, just backing up the Brinks truck for the light speed. Those are the two best things he did, and those are two things that we should say, you know what, he got those things right. Let's carry those forward. We have to crack the teachers' unions. The teachers' union, the voucher system is the only way to do it, and it's very reasonable to say parents who are paying shit tons of taxes should be able to take that money and educate their kids however they damn please. And if we're going to spend $15,000, $20,000 per student on public education, as a parent, whether you're in Brooklyn or Boise, Idaho, you should have access to that $15K, and you should pick where it goes, and you should take control of it. That's the way to stop this mashugana.
J-Cal, I had this crazy realization as you were saying this, which is like, if I said to you, electricians union, I would say thumbs up. Auto workers union, thumbs up. SEIU generally, thumbs up. Nurses unions, thumbs up. But if I say teachers union, I just have this incredibly negative connotation now of an incredibly political class of people who are going completely out of their way to basically just like have exceptions and asterisks that apply to them and them only. Am I the only one that feels that way? It just seems like it's trending to where like teachers
don't think
unions
they
almost
care about
becoming a
teachers.
4-letter word.
Yeah.
I don't think they care about teachers. Yeah.
They don't care about students. These
But
teachers
unions-
do,
but unions
the
in general
does
do a
not
very
care about
important
the teachers
job.
or the students. Yeah.
No, but I think unions in general do a really important job. And I think that, like all these other unions, I have a very positive thought about what they're meant to be.
You
But teachers'
can be
unions-
pro-union or pro-organized labor, but be against this specific union.
That's what I'm saying.
Just like you can be pro-reforming criminal justice and the unfairness of it, while still being against Chesa Boudin's insanity that people should be able to be murdered and killed and beaten in the streets
impunity. Yeah.
with impunity.
Well,
this is
yeah.
This is not an even. This is a completely logical position to have. I want to not put people in jail for cannabis sales, and I want to remove people from nonviolent offenders from the incarceration. You can believe that while believing you should incarcerate somebody who murders somebody. This is not a hard logic to understand.
Right. Totally. No, you're right. I mean, it's a combination of ideology and special interests working against common sense and what the average citizen wants.
Right.
And did you see what happened?
It's not Republican or
Right.
Democrat, David. You and I agree on this, and we're
Yeah,
on
of course.
other sides of the
We
spectrum.
just want common sense government that functions for the people as opposed to special interests or these radical ideologies.
I want to have a couple of pops at the Battery and go walk to another bar without having to fear that somebody's going to stab me for my goddamn iPhone. Or some poor kid's going to get attacked by somebody deranged out of their mind on fentanyl.
Look, this is why Newsom's going to get recalled, is because crime and education are just fundamental issues. We do not feel safe in our cities. Crime is out of control, and we're going crazy that we can't send our kids to schools. These are issues that affect cities and suburbs. Everyone's on the same page. And I think you're right that the teachers' unions have overplayed their hand and exposed themselves as not caring about the kids, just looking out for their own benefits. They want to be on paid vacation forever, effectively. And do you see, there was a great example where in Oakley, which is a town in the East Bay, the whole, they were caught on, recorded on Zoom.
The hot mic.
Yeah, there's a hot mic where the entire school board was forced to resign because they got caught mocking parents for quote, wanting their babysitters back so they could smoke pot. I mean, the cynicism here is unbelievable. I mean, these people are supposed to care about teaching young people, and they view themselves as just babysitters.
Yeah. And they view parents as stoners. Yeah, I mean,
we got to shake up this system, and the problem is
competition.
We need competition, and look, the problem is that the people that when you have unions running the schools, there's no reward for excellence. The bad people don't get fired, and the good people don't get rewarded. So they,
if you're anti-competition, you are a moron. Everything in this world gets better when people compete on the playing field, in the arena, to build better products and services. And in healthcare and in education and in housing, the government, and dare I say it, the far left, is stopping people from competing. We should look at ourselves as customers. And that's what's happening right now. People are saying, we're the customer. Gavin Newsom and Chesa Boudin, we don't want that product. That product, get the hell out of here with that product and give us something reasonable. No person who's Republican, no person who's Democratic doesn't want safety and doesn't want competition in education. The only people who want to stop competition in education are special interests. Period.
Amen. Man, you've been
sorry, these red pills are fucking great.
Man, these red pills. Wow.
These Peter Thiel red pills are woo! God. Man, I thought Adderall was good, but God, these Miami, Keith Raboy, Peter Thiel, Stanford red pills got me lit. I'm ready to go. All right, anybody give a shit about NFTs? Non-fungible tokens? I mean, I think it's kind of brilliant, but
by the way, don't we only have 2 minutes?
2 minutes. NFTs.
I think we should wrap. I think we should wrap on the red pills.
Yeah.
I mean, that you can't beat that. That was
Can't
hot.
beat some red pills?
That was hot.
When are we going to see each other? I can't take it anymore. I'm like a caged animal. I need to get out of here. I need to get on one of your planes.
I'm doing a
Freebird. Where's your plane? Get me on the plane.
I'm
Go
doing a
ahead.
home and away poker game on Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday in LA, Thursday up here, but it's 500 and 1,000, Jason.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
And you got to
But
play
maybe I'll
both
come.
days. You got to play both days, so you can't play one or the other. You got to play both days.
Oh boy.
Chamath is trying to make his billions back.
I don't know if I want to be in a 500 1K game. No, I'm going to go pass.
How is that
on
any different than the normal game? I mean, like,
In fact,
I just, you can't limp in with your aces. You're going to get demolished, get 4 callers.
Yeah, Rick Solomon will jump the fence with a 7-8 and bust you.
and laugh.
And laugh.
Nick, you got to edit all this out.
No, you don't. This is the best part. the Matcha King of Malibu. The Malibu Matcha King.
Matcha King, exactly.
Malibu. Tell him I'll take a matcha with extra honey. All right, everybody. For the Queen of Quinoa, for Rain Man David Sachs, and for the demolished dictator who will rebuild. I believe in you, Chamath. You can rebuild it. You can rebuild that. Chip in a chair. Come on. Let's get back in the game. Chip in a chair. Give us another. IPO, G, H, whatever.
my
Q.
gosh.
Let's go, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Love you guys.
Thanks to our sponsors
Bye, guys.
that don't exist.
Back at you.
Back at you.
Ditto. Love you, besties.
We'll let your winners ride.
Rain Man David Sachs.
And instead, we open source it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it.
Love you, besties. Queen of Quinoa. Besties are back.
That's my dog taking a notice in your driveway. Oh, man.
We should all just get a room and just have one big huge orgy because they're all just useless. It's like this sexual tension that they just need to release somehow.
Wet your beak. Wet your beak.
We need to get merch.
Besties are
I'm
back.
going all in.